slave master. Talking about the head and the billies and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give.
The Danielle Archer, Jamaican attorney at law. Morning, Brother Akka. Morning, Sister Danielle.
Greetings. Morning, Sister YaYa. Good morning to our illustrious Sister Danielle Archer. And good morning to our guests, our listeners, sorry, on Prem Radio and XTV this morning. It's a pleasure once again to be on Sunday Review.
Sending your greetings from my side of the rock to all of our listeners right across. Thank you for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you, Sister YaYa and Brother Akko.
Give thanks. So, this is not the norm, right? But this is the new norm. Once a month, Sister Danielle S. Archer will be here for Analyze the News with Brother Akko and me. She's just that damn good. If you're not done, subscribe to Eater's Dispatch podcast on a roll. Go do that right now and share a link with everybody. Real talk. So this morning, we're analyzing Caribbean news story. Brother Akko, as I've said often, so there's a need for it because there are people behind those headlines and their headlines have impact on our lives. And truthfully, the Caribbean, I would say, is in crisis right now. Like everything I think it can get worse, it get worse. So Brother Akko, where we have stories from this week?
Sister, we have stories from Venezuela, Cuba, St. Kitts, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Vincent, Guyana, Trinidad, Belize, Jamaica again, and St. Lucia.
Let's get going.
So the first story this morning is from Grenada. And it's a very important story from the perspective of the fact that it's World Cooperative Day. Yesterday was July the 4th, World Cooperative Day. And I have been a member of a cooperative since I was a child in school. We always thought, we were brought up into the cooperative movement and tradition. And then later on, when I started working, I also joined the company cooperative. And then later on, I became a board member of the local community cooperative. And the Cooperative Day, World Cooperative Day was yesterday. And so let me just read a bit of it out. So the theme this year was International Cooperatives for World Peace. I think that was the theme this year, Cooperatives for World Peace. So it was celebrated throughout the Caribbean. I know my cooperative in my community had something. And I think it's important. I know there are people who have problems with the cooperative because of what some people, term corruption and so on. But the 2026 theme aligns with sustainable development, and the co-heading is peace, justice, and strong institutions, emphasizing that peace is supported by fairness, opportunity, and trust. Cooperatives contribute to these conditions by ensuring that economic benefits are shared broadly, fostering resilience, and encouraging collaboration across diverse groups. There are many different kinds of cooperatives. Agricultural cooperatives, which help to improve food security and rural livelihoods. Credit unions, which are financial cooperatives, which are also geared at accessing equitable financial services for working people. And then you have worker-owned cooperatives, which are created to guarantee stable and dignified unemployment opportunities. Now, the reason I think it is important to discuss this is because there's a serious assault on the cooperative movement. And the corporate culture, which seems to have permeated the global environment, and which is one of the foundation pillars of the new, well, it's not so much a new economic model, but it's a new manifestation of capitalism or neoliberalism. It has waged wars against the cooperative movement. I know in my cooperative, we had to struggle because they wanted to change the rules to take away the power from workers and ordinary people who ran the cooperative and bring it under the central bank. Now, that is not to say that cooperatives do not have problems, but cooperatives are people-centered institutions and one of the most democratic set of institutions in the world. They are worker-owned or member-owned in case of a membership. They are member-owned and very democratic. Unlike a bank, which is a corporation, a credit union is a cooperative. And I always emphasize the need that cooperation is what builds communities and builds civilizations. I don't know any civilization that was built by competition. While there's room for competition, but civilizations and societies are only built through cooperation. So I wanted to say that and to encourage people to support and create more cooperatives wherever they are as a means of advancing social, cultural, and economic agendas. That's what I would say. I don't know if my
Thanks, brother. I could definitely want to hear Sister Danielle. I just want to say quickly, my observation in Belize, for example, that sometimes these cooperatives are co-opted by political interests. And once it go down that direction, that the hardest thing to get it back to where it authentically created for. Go ahead, sis. Make I hear 2 cents.
You know, the thing is, when you think about cooperatives, you think about shared ownership, shared risk, and shared reward. You also think about the fact that grassroots people have access where they have an income and financial sustainability different from if they go to a bank. I think the theme is not just aspirational. I think the theme is something cooperatives need to work on, because if you look at their governance structures, it's one of the last places in any Caribbean territory that you're going to find that kind of membership, straight democratic participation that works. So I think we need to really do more. On my side, I haven't seen much about it coming from the Jamaican end, but it is true. It appears to be a dying breed, and we really do need to do something about it because it facilitates democratic participation, economic inclusion, and Akko is right, social cohesion, which are critical if it is that we want to develop the Caribbean.
Well, let me, I know it's your area expertise, Sister Danielle. Oftentimes, the people that we keep voting for electoral positions or political positions, government leadership, corporation, like we really not see them people, we genuinely not see the character of them people, or we just ignore it and go along with their merit. True. Or sometimes their lived experiences. Like we keep to make the same mistakes that the character of these people that we have in leadership. What are your 2 cents on that?
I like how you talk about the character. Are we concerned about their character? Because many times we don't ask about the character, you know. Many times we go according to the likes. We're not drilling down and asking the questions and holding them accountable. And so the architecture is failing because we are not ensuring that the architecture is built upon integrity. So I hear you, but do we want to do it? Do we see in the leaders the very things that we secretly admire and would like to attain to? Or are we courageous enough? And one of those things, Sister YaYa, you have to remember in this Caribbean state, not just here in Jamaica, but it's a flame that is right across the Caribbean. Courage is lacking. We're not standing up to our leaders. We're not willing to challenge them. And the leaders are not willing to challenge their supporters either. So we have this thing there where we say, oh, I saw him stay, I saw politicians stay, I saw it go. We're not ready to shake it up and to make a difference. And so I hear you. We're going to take it over. They're going to take over cooperatives. They're going to keep pushing that narrative. The challenge for us as a people, as workers, as people who build these populations, is not just to like them. It's to hold them accountable.
Respect, and that hard for the car we not hold with own self accountable. The people in our house accountable. So
that's the point right there. You hear the orchestra in the background? That's the point. So if we don't want to be held accountable, we are going to be fearful and hesitant to hold others accountable.
Respect, Brother Akko.
Well, part of the challenge, I would say the problem, is the whole culture of our, what you may call political process. And I'm looking at it from the sociological point of view. We have a culture of what I call performance and superficiality, in that it is not ours. It was imposed on us. You see? Right? So this so-called British Westminster model of representative democracy, right, which is the dominant culture of politics. And we have to understand politics is not electoral. Politics is everything that we do, whether we elect people in the cooperative, whatever, it is politics. Politics is not just electoral participation, which is what they limited to. But politics is the art of living, which comes from the Greek word, I think, polis, or whatever it was, and so on. So our whole life is about politics, and we don't understand that. So what has happened is that we have created this, what I call kind of sectoral approach to politics. And so we see politics as related to government structures and parliament, but not to cooperatives and to sporting groups and so on. So the culture of our politics is a culture of performance, right?
Okay.
It's a culture of superficiality, very, very superficial. So you will not ask questions of character. Like they will tell a man make a great speech, which is what Caribbean leaders are good at. They know exactly what to say when, and they know what to evoke, what emotions to evoke. And I always use this example of Eric Williams, our first prime minister. When he made the famous speech, Massa Day Done, which is what held my mother, and they still talk about that. Massa Day Done. But what did he do? There was no policy that connected to the end of Massa Day. So, for example, he put education back in Massa's hand through something called the Concordat. And that is our politics. And that filters into all aspects, whether it's a sporting club, whether it is a cooperative or whatever, or a community organization. We choose people both on performance and superficiality, whether
Appearance,
a friend or and so on. And that culture has to be transformed. The other thing we must understand about the cooperative movement is the cooperative movement is anathema to the dominant political culture and economic culture, in that it is a democratic institution. So I explained to people, when I was head of the education committee, and I will explain to people that when you go to the bank, you have no influence in the bank.
true.
You put your money in and that's it. When you are a member of a cooperative or a financial cooperative like a credit union, you have the right to vote a member in. You can be on a committee. I was on the education committee, the supervisory committee. You have a greater sense of participation. When you have an AGM, for example, which is annual general meeting, you can make proposals, as I have done, from the floor, and you can see it impacted in terms of policy. There was a time in my credit union that they weren't doing something. And I called, I think our minimum, or you had to get like 50 members to call a special general meeting. And I was able to mobilize 50 members to enforce to the executive that we needed a special general meeting. And so we have all of these kinds of powers as individuals in the cooperative, but we have to understand that we cannot subject it to what I call the dominant culture of performance and superficiality.
It's going to be hard though, Akko, because that's how we practice.
But not impossible.
Definitely not impossible.
But
and it's a question
the
of
famous,
whether.
I always give the famous Hannibal line when Hannibal said he wanted to cross the Alps, and the general said, well, it's never been done. And he said, we must make a way or find a way. And
That is right. That is right. And that I like that approach, because what you're really alluding to is our willingness to reconstruct institutions to keep what it is that is of value to our societies. And a lot of times, as you speak about even Caribbean political parties and the Caribbean way of government, we've taken the Westminster model. But after so many years, have we made it Caribbean? We haven't reconstructed it. We haven't kept the things that are working. We haven't done an assessment of the things that don't work. We haven't thought about how it is that we're going to improve it. And as you said, when Eric Williams gave that speech, he wasn't only Caribbean national to do that, but we have not had Caribbean policies that have made sure that institutions remain Caribbean.
So my response to the question of how we made the Westminster model our own, it is not our own, and possibly will never be our own. It was imposed. We have indigenous methods. Like, for example, the historian from Haiti, Sister Baina Bello, one of the most profound statements she made in a lecture or a Zoom event we had. She said that the cacique, which is in our history says a king, she said the cacique was not a king. The cacique was a communal sense of government with people, right? When the Haitians looked at their own way of forming governmental institutions, they look at indigenous approaches, right? So we are people of African descent, we are people of Indian descent. There are methods in Ethiopia, in the Congo, which many of us came, there are systems that we could have borrowed from, but because of the slave and colonization process, we eschewed anything from our tradition. And my attitude is that for 60 years we've been trying this Westminster model. It doesn't even work in Britain. Look at the mess Britain is having right now. That's 7 prime ministers in the last 10 years. So we have to look at alternatives and look at our own history, our own culture. I'm not saying we can't borrow from Europe, but we have to begin what they call the indigenous and the endogenous method of looking at transforming our political culture.
I just want to throw in there, Sister YaYa, because you talk about indigenous people. How the Maroons were structured and how they continue to govern is a good example of taking that indigenous method. Because you talked about how it is that they were able to successfully defeat the Spanish and the British. That has a lot to do with how they had their own governance structures and they have been able to survive. So you are onto something, Ako. It is a question of whether we are willing to take on the indigenous lessons and practices that we have and truly make them work without being so tied to the ancestry of Western civilization.
I want to say this and make brother Ako go to his second story. And I know we want to get through as many stories as possible, but what matters to me is that we really flesh out these stories that carries weight for me. And the underpinning of one lot of our indigenous and African ways of being is our spirituality. It's our way of living daily. Now, this won't be a process because culturally, in the region what we call the Caribbean, one lot of people identify with Christianity. And that generations and centuries of people attached to that. So it takes moments like these where we have, because when you have the conversations, at least I'm not familiar with them, to have these honest conversations, at least where I make people think. Might be uncomfortable with it, but at least then they hear something where they know if they be honest with themselves. It makes sense what they say. Even if you can't apply it, but just for hear, you get tired of the suffer, that for damn sure. True. And here's an option that you may not have heard about before. So, hi to that reasoning, Sister Danielle and Brother Ako. Next story, Brother Ako.
So the other story, the headline of this story relates to mental health in the Caribbean, what is called the mental health imperative. And it comes out of Grenada again. And I think it's very important because I've given mental health a stigma in the Caribbean. And rather than treat it as a regular medical condition, we have created social stigmas around mental health, and which is not good. So I wanted to just read briefly what it is here, and we can discuss that. And the headline is Grenada Mental Health Imperative, and it begins with, math and English prepare the brain for work, but who prepares the mind for life? For most of us, no one did. We learned to read and count, but we never thought. We learn to read and count, but we never thought what to do when our thoughts work against us. We figured it out alone or found a way to survive. This is why mental health must be taught in our schools deliberately, the way every other subject is as part of the curriculum. Adolescence is when the mind is most turbulent and vulnerable, and most consequentially when the early signs, hold on a second, when the early signs of mental illness begin to appear. Anxiety, the most common mental illness in the world, is the clearest example. More than half of the people who develop an anxiety disorder in their lifetime show signs before, show signs of common mental, more than half of the people who develop an anxiety disorder in their lifetime show signs of this before it actually happens. So I want to stop here, but I think you got the gist of the thing, that mental health is an issue that we need to really have a different perspective on in the Caribbean. And we are seeing it more and more everywhere you go in every major Caribbean city. And even now in the villages, like where I am, I'm now seeing mentally ill people on the streets and so on and so forth. And that is something that we have not, what I call, develop a proper response to sociologically and psychologically and culturally in the Caribbean.
I would
I'm
say
with
these
you on
are
that.
all fruits again of the Westminster system. So when we got flag and anthem independence, there was no genuine people's assembly of, listen, what we really want for we people as diverse as we are. And this one, beef we value system. So most of it remain with the church state education system, and the church first priority of convert people to for them we are experiencing the world and the afterlife. They're never about truly the development of human beings, as many indigenous and African people from creation that study overstand that the earth, the one part of we family. So I think everything what we talk about could come back to the same thing every damn time.
And
This,
watch how I pull that into you, Sister YaYa, because that's where I wanted to tie it. You know, I'm looking at it as a structural defect in our governance, in our health systems and our national narratives. Because if we really want resilient societies, you know, Sister YaYa, we have to engineer them. We have to look at situations where vulnerability is not punished, silence is not normalized, and care is not delayed. So look at our laws. How many Caribbean territories have mental health acts that help to treat and deal with these situations, to protect the dignity? How many do we have? What's the state of our public health systems? Is it our community care system? Is care made affordable? Is care provided? How is care done? Are we into slogans, or have we done a little bit more to make sure that we're building out a system that is responsive to these needs? And as a Caribbean, we have adapted the Western approach to mental health. We have a slogan and we have an advertorial, but we haven't really done more as the traditional tribal societies of Africa would do in terms of how they would treat and utilize community approaches to make sure that we are prepared for life in addition to the math, English, and mental ability.
Ashe. Brother Akko?
Well, I support what Sister Danielle said. We have to, what I may call, resort to traditional methods. Okay. One of the things we have sort of, what I call, discarded is our traditions that have served us for a very long time. And in the embrace of modernization, we have discarded a lot of the practices that kept us whole, right? I would know, for example, growing up in a large family and in a small community, that once people saw a little, what you may call, deviant behavior, they will sort of pay attention to it. We have become so individualistic now and less communal that people are, you know, unraveling in front of us, and we are not seeing it until it has exploded beyond the community's capacity to do something about it. Okay? So this is what you have. And another factor is, while social problems could be a contributing factor to mental health, I believe that our diet has contributed significantly to mental health deterioration in the Caribbean, right? We have embraced diets that are not that are dangerous to us, that you know, what I call what do you call it? Not so for this one, a diet that does not cause our biological self to grow. I can't find the term I'm looking for, but you understand what I'm saying. And so we are stunted in what I'm looking for, both sometimes mentally and physically, in terms of what diets we have. And now it is even getting worse, that we are moving away from our traditional. I mean, one of the things that happened with when they decided to study the Jamaican track and field athletes. How much yam they eat, right? Tell everybody, tell them they eating yams, right? We grew up on this. I always use this example. When I was in the PTA, because my nephew was in the school, so I was the representative. And I used to make the statement and people would laugh. So when I was growing up, you had physical work to do. There was no backhoe excavator. Men were digging this dirt with their hands, right? But what they were eating, yams, cassava, dashing, you understand? And they were doing this kind of work, this physical work, and weren't getting sick. And we know KFC, McDonald's, you know, we are, and these are not food, these things are products designed in a lab, and we are not consuming these things. So I in my opinion, a contributing factor to mental illness could be the poor diet and the foreign diet that we now eat. So that's what I would say.
You perhaps have to have a little look at Hilary Beckles' work. Remember, Professor Beckles did do some study on the Caribbean diet, and he did point out that the plantation was not just an economic system, it was a biological regime. And he looked at how it affected the structure, the social structure, the health of Caribbean nationals. So you may be onto something.
You are absolutely correct. In fact, one of the research that came out of that thing that Hilary Beckles did is on high blood pressure. Caribbean people and Africans have high blood pressure, okay? The medicine that is created for high blood pressure, it solves the problems among Africans on the continent and Europeans. The people who are most resistant to it are African Americans and African Caribbeans. We descendants of the slaves. So apparently there's some kind of biological, if you want to call it, impact that this has that makes us resistant to high blood pressure medicine. And that is evidence found by the research by Hilary Beckles. Yeah. So evidently, dietary consumption, whatever we eat for food, plays a role in a lot of our illnesses and consequently our mental and psychological illness. Not to mention the fact Fanon's work on mental illness in Algeria as an expression of oppression, now, and which people are now beginning to study again. When Fanon worked in Algeria, and one of the things Fanon found was that he would analyze an Algerian under French colonization, and they would be sick. And he said there was no biological, any physical thing for them being sick. It was a sickness of the mind that was causing physical ailment. And he was able to isolate the fact that people who are oppressed, their psychological and mental conditions create physical illnesses. So that is something we have to look at when we look at the mental illness, beside the dietary factor.
I had a listener, I had a land. Next story. Thanks, both of you.
All right, so the next story comes out of Venezuela. Very interesting, especially what is happening in Venezuela. And the headline, which is a very important headline, is called Disaster Capitalism in Haiti Gives a Glimpse into the Imperialist Shock Doctrine that could rattle Venezuela long after the earthquakes. I'm going to read part of it now. The shock doctrine and the disaster capitalism comes from a book by Naomi Klein. She wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, in which she explained how capitalists and imperialists create disaster in order to exploit people. And then when a disaster is created, they exacerbate these disasters in order to profit from it. So let me just read briefly what it is. The US has attacked Venezuela through various means for decades and kidnapped President Maduro, but is now claiming to assist with earthquake relief. If its role in Haiti is any guide, that so-called aid from the US is a Trojan horse bringing more plunder and control. For decades, the US has waged carefully planned and unrelenting attack on Venezuela's economy, using unilateral coercive measures, commonly known as economic sanctions, to destabilize and destroy the country's socialist Bolivarian government. Though the earthquakes that devastated the nation were not caused by the US, and some have questioned that, the destabilization of the Venezuelan government, economy, and infrastructure was caused by the US. The damage from those sanctions was so pervasive that any natural disaster large enough would be catastrophic, leading to foreign aid being used not only to produce enormous capitalist profits for foreign interests, but also to bring the country more firmly under US control. This is the situation Venezuela faces today. George W. Bush imposed the first coercive measures against Venezuela in 2006. Democratically elected President Hugo Chavez had the nerve to criticize the US for its bloodthirsty response to 9/11 and refuse to support or participate in the US sham counterterrorism efforts. Chavez did so in a very public and embarrassing way for Bush at the UN, when he declared at the lectern that Bush was the devil and that the podium had sulfur, right? The aggression towards Venezuela continued. President Barack Obama, representing the US imperialist elite, had personally decided to take on the task of defeating Venezuela. And to quote Chavez, President Barack Obama, representing the US imperialist elite, has personally decided to take on the task of defeating my government and intervening in Venezuela to control it. So I will stop here. I think this first two paragraphs captures the whole essence of what is called disaster capitalism, in which natural disasters are used to exploit countries, and then in some instances, disasters are created by sanctions and other extra political means to create these kinds of disasters for economic interests, mainly in the metropolitan north, the US, and so on, to exploit these countries. And Haiti was the template for this. And let me just say this. People don't realize this, but Haiti was self-sufficient in rice before the initiative of the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation came in there after one of the crises, raised money supposedly to assist the people of Haiti, and created a scenario because Arkansas, Clinton State, was a rice-producing state. And Clinton used the intervention of the US to dump cheap Arkansas rice and totally destroyed the rice production in Haiti. So this is what is called disaster capitalism and so on and so forth. It's
break time. Stick a fin. Hold your thoughts, Sister Danielle. I just caught up in the conversation. I need to study the clock. I'm going to take one short break. I'm going to stay with me. Share this link that XTV Belize. It's the live on Facebook and YouTube. And tell everybody for tuning in for the next 60 minutes. Hail up my brother down south. Penny. Thanks for tuning in. I'm a brother Vilma Pan. And the people that Jamaica, Trinidad. Yes, you know, lucky. Break time.
In these formative years, children develop cognitive skills, social skills, emotional, language, and physical skills that serves as a foundation for lifelong learning, serves as a foundation for future success.
These investments create a nurturing environment that promotes school readiness and ensures that children in Santa Cruz and surrounding communities have access to quality early childhood education in a setting that is safe, welcoming, and developmentally appropriate.
The facility features a spacious classroom area, kitchenette, child-friendly sanitary facilities, dedicated amenities for teachers, and secure storage spaces to support effective teaching and learning.
This facility is a testament to the results achieved when government, development partners, and communities work together towards a shared vision, building a brighter future for the children of Belize.
Before our grid reached across Belize, it was built by generations of Belizeans committed to connecting communities and powering progress. Through the hands, the dedication, and the vision of our people, the grid grew with Belize. A nation built through strength and resilience, and a network built pole by pole. Today, that responsibility continues, strengthened by every hand that follows, each generation building on the last and carrying forward a shared responsibility, serving communities, powering schools, hospitals, businesses, and homes, supporting a nation that continues to grow. Belize Electricity Limited, built to serve, serving Belize.
The biggest football event in the world is finally here, and Smart is giving you the chance to play and win. Before every match starts, predict who will win. The more predictions you make, the more chances you have to win. Get 1 point towards your total when you guess the winning team. Predict the exact score and earn up to 4 points. The top scorer at the conclusion of the World Cup wins the grand prize of $2,500 in cash. That's not all. Players get a chance to win weekly prizes. Plus, our quarter-final winner gets a watch party package. Play directly in the Smart app for just 50 cents per entry. Prediction starts June 1st to July 18, 2026. Don't just watch the World Cup. Play along and win with Smart. Smart, bringing people together.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience. With a wide range of customer service options, you save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For added convenience, if all operators are busy, you can leave your number and an operator will return your call as soon as possible to ensure you receive the support you need. Depending on your transaction type, we may need to verify your identity through a set of security questions. And remember, Atlantic Bank will never request your username or password for Atlantic Online via phone call, text, or email, ensuring your personal information remains safe and secure. Our support team is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in both English and Spanish. Simply dial 223-1212. This is a dedicated line for our contact center. Atlantic Bank is committed to providing you with exceptional service and the tools you need to manage your finances conveniently and securely. Take full advantage of our easy-to-use contact center services today.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
Every great job starts at Brothers Habet, with the best supplies and the right support, including free delivery on site, so you can focus on the job. Brothers Habet, working with contractors since 1983.
Because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation.
The Sunday Review, we're reasoning with Caribbean stories from the region, and Brother Akka choose the stories, and intentionally we don't know what that is story before the conversation start, because we want organic, high vibration, real authentic conversations. Sister Danielle, you were going to respond back to Brother Akka's story from outer Grenada as it relates to mental health.
No. Disaster capitalism.
Sorry, disaster capitalism. My mistake. Yes,
right.
Yes.
Because he made mention of the shock theory. And so what I wanted to add to that because he used the example of the Haitian rice crisis, and given my background as to governance and thinking about governance as architecture, I think it's not just a crisis about the rice and about what is happening in Venezuela in terms of the opportunities that are now going to present themselves because of the culminating factors and the impact of several political avenues, client crisis, the environmental impact of the earthquake. All of that here presents an opportunity and a crisis for government. What I want us to understand and to see is that when we think about even how rice was deposited in Haiti and what is now going to happen in Venezuela, is that it's about systems. When a nation is under pressure, rapid policy changes happen. And the question is always about whether or not they have the strength or the stability to be resilient. And when you have weak systems, as we have seen in Venezuela, coming off because of the political intrusions, the political appetite, and all the things that have happened, the very same thing happens in Haiti. So it's a larger question for the Caribbean. Do we have resilient systems? And what is the extent of the resilient systems? Because in a moment of crisis, the question is it an opportunity for political actors to take play? And if it is, it's not a question about whether change will happen. It is who benefits and whether the nation itself can survive. And that's how I would see the shock theory, Akko, because it does speak to multiple actions, but it also speaks to the level of the systems and the kind of systems and the architecture of systems that we have.
So that I want to ask for repeat what I want to say again, because it's so profound. I think repetition helps. Say that again, Sister.
All right. So when we talk about, let's break it down. So you have the shock theory. The essence of the shock theory that Akko was talking about was the fact that you have political challenges, yes? You have economic challenges. You have the embargo that was there. But you also now have this impact of the earthquake. It creates an opportunity for political actors, but it's not only a problem for Venezuela. We've seen it happen in Haiti, as Akko pointed out, and when he made mention of the rice and the importation of rice that killed an entire economy. So what I want people to understand is that when we think about these things happening, we have to think about our system, the system of governance that we have. Because when a nation is under pressure, rapid policy changes can reshape how things happen and impact the generations. And so when we think about it, we think about pressure, how the system responds to pressure, and whether or not it's resilient. And I'm proposing that when you think about what is happening in Venezuela and what has happened in Haiti, we have to ask ourselves, what is the state of the resilience of other Caribbean governments? If such a crisis was to happen in your Caribbean territory, who would benefit? Would the nation emerge better off, or would it emerge worse off? Because at the end of the day, it is a question about the pressure that is on a system, how resilient is the system, and whether or not there is leadership that can guide you through that moment.
I would say we are experiencing these crises for generations. Now, it might not be an earthquake, but we want to live it and the suffer and suffer we people and the dead because they don't have care in the healthcare system. The education system never designed to really liberate. So we continue to remain mentally enslaved. Like this, the one vicious cycle. I don't know how you go for. I know people that say for bread, but I want to have the high intellectual conversation. Yeah. But how do you go from, you need one level of knowledge and courage before you could think, okay, we could put our minds together beyond political leaders throughout the region and see what solutions we could come up with, even if it's small before we build to scale. That, like, who to have the conversations or what is happening in the region, well, who we could link with, like what solutions we could have, because we live with there, even if we don't analyze it like how the two just do it, the impact of their intellectual conversation that for we bodies and beings every day.
All right. Here's what I'm going to say to that before I allow Akka to come in. There is a slogan that I've mentioned in an article I wrote a couple of weeks ago, and it has resonated with me in terms of Jamaica, and I think it's the same for the Caribbean in light of what you said. If you carry a load long enough, you forget how heavy it is. And it's a load that we have been carrying as Caribbean people. The challenge that we're going to have these conversations is what you're doing just now, Sister YaYa and Brother Akko. Creating a platform and a forum to raise the issues and we keep talking about them. You're going to a conference, you're talking about NGOs, you're talking about political actors, we're talking about workers. Look here, workers are smart, you know. It's not a high-level conversation. These are conversations that they're having. What they do not have is an opportunity to be heard. And that is what we need to create. In the 1938 riots that we had in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean where there was labor unrest, it's because people were tired of carrying the load. And where we are in the Caribbean, no people tired, and not because them bread butter. Some people, you will say, are more courageous than others and will expend themselves. But courage is really lacking in the Caribbean. And that's the truth. Courage is lacking. Political leaders are there because they're performing and it looks pretty. Media houses are present because they don't want to rock the boat, because they don't want to miss some contracts for advertorials. News houses want likes, so they're going to make sure that they say the right thing because they want to make sure they have tons of followers. And regular, ordinary Jamaicans and Caribbean nationals whose voices aren't heard, it's not because they don't want to talk about these things. They do not have the avenues to do it. And in an opportunity of fair, where, as you say, the question is about economy, what is desirous is courageous leaders like you to create a platform. And we just need you to light a fire. And I guarantee you, it may not happen today, but people listening right across the Caribbean in their small bars and shops, they're the ones that we're depending on to light that fire. Because once they start, you ever see fire upon a cane line? You just need somebody to step up and start to ask these questions. That's why I keep saying we have to hold people accountable. We're at that point. We're boss. We have to put on the load, because we are carry one load, We have to put on the load and decide, say, hold on, I can't carry this no more. My back hurt me. And actually do something about it. Because our leaders, they're part of the status quo. And they ain't gonna move until we move them. So have these conversations, ask your questions, and find people who have like minds and make a plan as to how it is that you are going to make a difference in your small communities. It will catch a fire.
Respect, Brother Akko.
So, a couple points Sir Danielle makes consistently, which is very important. We re-emphasize the issue of systems and architecture, right? She speaks a lot about that, systems and architecture. Now, when you look at our system in the Caribbean, social, cultural, and political system, not only was it an imposition, right, but it was never meant to serve us. So we continue to uphold these systems that have not worked in our interest. And this is something we have to understand. It is not enough to change political parties. It's not enough to change leaders. You have to create systems. That's why I say people, we have to move away from what I call representative democracy and move to participatory democracy. Create institutions that allow for the broadest participation as possible. And Danielle made a very important point. Workers are not ignorant people. They are smart people. But we don't create institutions and systems for them to engage. And I'll give you an example how about this. And we move on to the next story. My wife and I ran a school in Trinidad, a small community, 60 students, primary school. I wasn't involved. I was more in an advisory capacity. She was the principal and so on. So they called me one day and they said that there's this problem with the school and they don't know how to solve it, and they're going back and forth and back and forth. So I said to them, ask the children. So they said, what do you mean ask the children? I said, it's a problem of the school. If it's a business, the children are the customers. Ask them. And they brought the whole school together and explained to the children what was the problem. And guess what? The ideas came from the children that solved the problem in the school. But this is ad hoc. We don't have these systems that regularly encourage people to be involved and to participate. And our challenge in the Caribbean is to change what we have become comfortable with. And as someone said, one of the local political scientists said here, he said, people don't change their paradigm that easy. When they locked into a paradigm, it is not easy to change it. But with consciousness and education, we can. And I will end by saying this, I think it's Lenin said it. He said sometimes something that takes years to happen in months. And sometimes things you believe should happen in months take years to happen. So this is what Danielle says is so correct. We have to continue to do the work. Because what we may think may happen in years could take months. What could happen in months could take weeks. I remember in 1968, CLR James was in Trinidad. And they were talking about when they think, because they were looking at the build-up to the depression, and they asked him when he thinks another revolt, because 1937 was the last one we had. And they asked him, when do you think another revolt like 1937 would come? And he said, he think in 10 years. Guess what happened? That came in 1970, it came 2 years later. None of the political scientists and experts thought that Trinidad would have an uprising in 1970. They thought it would happen in 1978. But the consciousness grew at a rapid rate, and there was this revolt that transformed the society, and that has impacted today. So we have to continue to do the work, as Danielle said, and we have to understand it is a system that has to change. We must have a new architecture, complete of sociology, of culture, of politics, of economics. We have to reorganize our economics. We can have an economic system where 10 people control the entire the local economy, and then the multinationals control the rest. There must be a more diverse participation in the economy. And so we have to create systems that encourage and facilitate that.
But you know, Akko, just because I'm going to be devil's advocate once again, nothing unusual. You know, when you talk about creating systems and doing the work, in the 30s and 40s and leading up to the 60s, it was our political institutions that did the work. When I say political institutions, I mean political parties. And many of them have become heirlooms, decorative, historical relics, because they're living on what has happened in the past. These are the persons and the institutions that you would have expected by now to have been part of the change. But they are always looking towards what would happen if they were in power and they were able to take the reins and to benefit from all that power that would come to them. So they're not willing to change the system. What I think we could do as a people and as supporters of these parties that we see, and persons who sit on the fences and say they're both the same and so we're not interested in politics, is to somehow find a way to get our political parties to make some changes themselves, to start listening to the people. We do it all the time. We listen to our politicians when they come around for votes. Nobody challenges them when they come around for votes. We have to try to now take a stand and demand some changes even in the political systems. And that is one way I think that we could actually start having some kind of change, breaking that mold and allowing people to understand that it's the political institutions that we're looking to for courageous leaders who are expected to reconstruct themselves and the systems in which they operate.
Respect. You got 6 minutes for the next story, Brother Akko.
Okay, so the next story, I'm going to make one point that we do not have political parties in the Caribbean. One of the few avenues for expressing ourselves was through trade unions. We did not get what is called universal adult suffrage in Trinidad until 1945. It was the right to vote. Before that, only people who had property. So trade unions were one of the few institutions we had to express ourselves. And trade unions morphed into political parties. That's why if you notice you have the JLP and the PNPs.
That is true.
Trinidad was the same thing. And most of the Caribbean, all the labor parties, that old paradigm, right, needs to change. And we need to move beyond what what my friend like to call the 20th century structure and move into the 21st century structure, which is a more adaptable structure for our own societies.
Which is why I said reconstruct the political parties and the system.
Exactly, and I had that noted from before. you made that point about the reconstruction. I had that noted. Right. So the last point, and this may go to the next beyond the breaks society. So this is an important article that came out of Jamaica, and the headline is Caribbean moving backwards as structural weaknesses deepen, and it's from the Caribbean Development Bank. And it goes on to say, crime cost Caribbean economies an average of 3.4% of GDP between 2014 and 2020. Right? Falling development assistance and heavy tourism dependence are increasing the pressure on the region to divert. The Caribbean's long-standing structural weaknesses are making the region more vulnerable to global crises. The Caribbean Development Bank economists as well. Among the most significant weaknesses is the region's high level of informal employment. Roughly 70% of employment in CARICOM is classified as informal, compared with about 60% across Latin America and the Caribbean and 50% globally. The prevalence of informal employment limits the region's ability to scale up production because businesses remain fragmented rather than growing into larger enterprises capable of increasing output quickly. It also hampers technological innovation as formal institutions are needed to spread new technologies in a planned and coordinated way. If you have large organizations that can immediately scale up production, that's better than if you have fragmented sets of informal employment, according to CDB economists. Informality is not the only drag on economic performance. Crime also continues to weigh heavily on the performance of Caribbean economies, right? The cost of crime averaged 3.4% of GDP. These underlying vulnerabilities are reflected in the region's competitiveness rankings. The economists pointed to the Global Competitiveness Index, which shows Caribbean economies lagging developed countries in innovation, capability, infrastructure, and market size. While market size is an inherent constraint for small islands, he argued that innovation and infrastructure are areas in which the region can improve. These shortcomings are also translated into weaker productivity. And I'll stop here because I think it captures the fact that we are moving backward. And this is what Michael Manley wrote in one of his books when he I think it's called it Up the Down Escalator, right? In which he spoke about we keep making 2 steps forward and 4 steps backwards because of these inherent weaknesses that we have in terms of, again, the architecture, whether it's the economic architecture, the political.
So Danielle, you could get in for it before break.
Well, I'm on that roll this morning, governance as architecture. And it is something that I've spoken, as you know, YaYa, about in my podcast. It's building leaders. And so we start in the Caribbean, we start with a little taxi, we have a little shop. But in terms of building out what is required, the system that is required to make sure that it grows, we don't pay much attention to that. And so the structural deficiencies that are seen is a symptom of the reality that we're not building out that kind of system in our leadership. It's also a question of whether or not we have strong leadership, whether or not we're building leaders. And when I say building leaders, it's not just giving persons 16 subjects and making sure that you go to the university to have a degree. It is the quality of leadership. It is the system that we're building. And so when we look at the lack of systems within the Caribbean and how it is that we build our little small shops and become enterprises, that becomes a problem. So Akko, they are not far off. It is a reflection of how we have done business and how we're doing business. And a concerted effort needs to be focused on how do we build systems and governance as an architecture so that we see governance not just as what happens in the political circles, but governance as how we can relate to it in our own small businesses. Because governance is really everybody's business, But in the Caribbean, because we have a lack of public trust, and we said not with politics or governance is good, we're not focused on the reality that governance and politics is a significant part of how effective a business can be. And so we have to go back to basics, and perhaps this means a greater Caribbean conversation on how to build out leaders, the leaders that you're becoming, how you respond to pressure, how you build out systems. And I'm going to put a plug in here. The Ethos Dispatch helps with that because it creates an opportunity for you to start asking yourselves questions to see how you can build out that small business that you have to make sure that you create a legacy. And that's what the structural deficiencies are. The lack of being able to ensure that you create and build legacies that give you something to have when you long pass. Your family and the society benefits from these legacies because it's thinking about leadership that outlives applause.
Big respect, sister. Now, besides being intellectual, you got lyrics, you know. And that's why I know if you check my history, I don't know one way plug people. I mean all kind of people. But I spread Ethos Dispatch. I'm like, listen, they're under 10 minutes. So I absolutely love the sharpness of it. But waste no words. And the truth is that until and maybe they have other people I just never hear about or meet them before I could just tell them how far they're in a life right now. You're hearing conversations, you're still saying, but how you actually, like you could tell somebody I need to do something, but you don't have the building blocks, you don't know how to do it, you don't know who to connect with, you don't know. I said, well, like with Ethos Dispatch, it really give you the ABCs of being one better human being, for create one better world. It just so happened that we focus on the Caribbean right now. So I really advocate for Crime Radio start to broadcast Ethos Dispatch. We definitely need one sponsor. So to throw it out there for the real about it. And for other areas in the Caribbean, to other media houses in the Caribbean, if you're willing to sponsor Ethos Dispatch, just link Sister Danielle. Go to Ethos Dispatch. I link the right there, so I tell you how to reach her email address. Yes. And so we have to take a break. But heights of reasoning, Brother Akko, Sister Danielle. Break time.
El evento de fútbol más grande del mundo por fin llegó y Smart te invita a vivir toda la emoción del mundial. Antes de que empiece cada partido, predice quién se lleva la victoria. Entre más predicciones hagas, más oportunidades acumulas. Suma un punto cuando le aciertes al equipo ganador y si le atinas al marcador exacto, obtienes hasta 4 puntos. La persona con más puntos al terminar el mundial se lleva $2,500 en efectivo. Y eso no es todo. También habrá premios semanales durante toda la competencia. Además, el líder de los cuartos de final se lleva un paquete completo para armar su Watch Party. Participa directamente desde la app de Smart por solo 50 centavos por participación. Las predicciones estarán disponibles del 1 de junio al 18 de julio del 2026. No solo veas el mundial, vívelo con Smart. Smart, bring people together.
Formative years, children develop cognitive skills, social skills, emotional, language, and physical skills that serves as a foundation for lifelong learning, serves as a foundation for future success.
These investments create a nurturing environment that promotes school readiness and ensures that children in Santa Cruz and surrounding communities have access to quality early childhood education in a setting that is safe, welcoming, and developmentally appropriate.
The facility features a spacious classroom area, kitchenette, child-friendly sanitary facilities, dedicated amenities for teachers, and secure storage spaces to support effective teaching and learning.
This facility is a testament to the results achieved when government, development partners, and communities work together towards a shared vision, building a brighter future for the children of Belize.
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria, con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente. Ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito, realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m., en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
We've got the plumbing and electrical. We've got the paints and the brush and light fixtures. We've got steel, cement and tiles galore. We've got everything in that store. We've got windows and doors just for you. We've got sheetrock, plywood and hardwood too. Tools for gardening and the great outdoors. We've got everything in that store. We've got variety, quality, quantity. At Builders Hardware, variety, quality, quantity. At Builders Hardware, we've got the sinks and the tubs and cabinets. We've got the nuts and the bolts, so don't forget. We've got service with a smile. We've got everything in that store. We've got variety, quality, quantity. At Builders Hardware, variety, and quality, quantity. At Builders Hardware, builders who build with a passion and skill. Go to Builders Hardware.
Guatemala, Flamino, Guatemala, Flamino. This time we have the nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of.
Welcome back to the final segment of Sunday Review. I had to tell you, you could hear them break conversation. Woo! They heated. I have to stop, brother. I so we could come back from the air. Yes. So where were we when we left off? You were going to another story, brother Akko?
Yeah, we're going to another story, which is a very important story. And the headline is, this story came out of St. Kitts, actually. The headline is, CARICOM appoints PM Terrence Drew to lead Rastafarian Rights Committee. And just read a brief of it. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis has been selected to chair a newly established committee of CARICOM, look into the issues affecting the members of the Rastafarian community within the region and the world. The announcement came after the 42nd intersessional meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government on May 8th. At the time of this meeting, Dr. Terrence Drew was also serving as the chairperson of the Caribbean Community. The appointment was made in line with the mandate of CARICOM to further their commitment to equality, inclusion, and social justice. The organization has been working on the propagation of these values throughout the region and community. As the head of the newly formed committee, Dr. Drew will be responsible for recognizing, protecting, and promoting the rights of Rastafarians throughout the region. So this is an extremely important issue. When I entered formal politics in 1981, one of the issues we discussed on the platform was the brutalization and abuse of Rastafarians in Trinidad. Because we were labeled as this African organization because a number of the members. And because Rasta was seen as African, there was a lot of support for our political party among Rastafarians. It was a way of undermining our support. They terrorized Rastas. And in one case, in many cases, we had to take it to the platform in which policemen were abusing it. Also, the nastiest things you could ever think about the dirty Rastas, right? The underlying factor, in my opinion, why Rastas are so victimized is because Rastafarianism is an African retention, a radical form of what they call Africanism. And in the Caribbean, despite the fact that the majority of the people in what is quote unquote called the West Indies or the English speaking Caribbean of African descent, there's a hatred for things African and that any manifestation of things African. It wasn't only the Rastas. In Trinidad, there's a religious organization called the Shouter Baptist Syncretic Organization. And they were outlawed for many years by the British. And it was on the books until recently when one of the governments changed the laws. Because one of the factors in this Shouter Baptist was a manifestation of catching what they call power and shouting and so on. So even though their creed and their theology was Christianity, the outward expressions was African. It's the same thing with the Orisha. They banned the Orisha and they banned the drum. The steel band in Trinidad was banned. Up the North Carnival is Ash Wednesday, at certain time it's stopped, right, because of what is called the noise ordinance. All of these expressions of Africanism, right, which were suppressed by British colonialism, is still enshrined in our law and in some of our customs and cultural habits. So I would like to see what is going to happen with this thing with the Rastafarianism. And I know Sister Danielle, as an attorney, will have a lot to say about that.
I'm not sure I like the fact that you're pigeonholing me into this thing about being an attorney, because one of the things that I'd like to focus more on is how law builds out governance architecture. Did you see that, Sister YaYa? So it's more a question, and there are three things I wrote down while you were talking because I wanted to share it with you from a perspective that says it connects to everything we've spoken about this morning, particularly the structure and governance. So marginalization is not a cultural flaw, it's a design flaw. What is it a flaw of? The system. The system was never designed for a plural society. And having this conversation now tells me that we're moving along a line that says, are we now willing to discuss not just the subculture of Rastafarianism, but are we willing now to examine the governance structures that we have? So we are confronting a design flaw, because if you think about it, when we discuss Rastafarianism in the Caribbean, we are not just discussing the subculture. We are looking at how we build out a framework that takes into consideration our past, Brother Akko, whether or not we're considering how we treat persons who are marginalized. This is a group that will speak to you about political marginalization, being marginalized at hospitals, being marginalized within the education system. There are many who can tell you, particularly in Jamaica, about young boys or young girls who go to court or go to school, with locks and how they are treated. So the question is, when I see such a committee, is it on the face of it being responsive to a subculture, or is it going to take on a direction now that is going to assess it not as a subculture, but as a design flaw for governance structures to see how Caribbean institutions can build out a more favorable system that allows it to work for the marginalized within? Because it's not just the Rastafarians. There are other groups that have been affected. And it tells us whether or not we're willing to confront the errors of our past, to hear what we're talking about this morning, reconstructing a system throughout the Caribbean that takes into consideration these marginalized individuals. That's the legal and governance response, Brother Akko. But it's not, we're not going into the cases. I want us to focus more on governance.
I think For me, entire car come I just suck my teeth. Not real talk. Never designed for liberation.
It's not you alone, you know. That's why I put it that way, you know, Sister YaYa. When I say, is it that they're just responsive? Because remember, you know, Brother Aku, we're in that system of performance, you know. So we want to look good.
It's performance. But the point is we have to discuss it. You see, we know it's performance. We know they're not going to do anything because that's what Caribbean leaders do. They perform, talk big, dress in African culture, emancipation, and then will pass laws that are anti-African. You know what I mean? Even on the continent. So, but we have to discuss it, you know.
And in discussing it, I think you and I are going to be on the same page because the system reflects the values that it really embraces, yes? The true values, the straight hair look, the westernized culture, how we speak in Jamaica. We can't speak our patois in Parliament. The patois that you talk when you're trying to get a vote. You know, when you sit down on the corner, you cut a patois and you make the people them like you and you give them a vote. When you reach into Parliament, you have to speak the Queen's English or the King's English, which many people then don't understand those fancy words. So I don't know, Sister YaYa, I'm with you, but me have to son and make sure say me fix it into a method that tells me that there is hope that there can be something done about it.
And fair enough, brother. I can say we need to discuss it. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
We need to have
and
conversations.
hold them accountable too, you know. You know, we have
Brother Aka, we have another 13 minutes.
All right, so this is related to what we just said, and again, what I would say is one of the issues that Sister Danielle has been talking about for a long time. The headline is, this is out of St. Vincent, and it has to do with a case, again, of marginalization. The headline is, Justice Cannot Thrive Where Accountability is Optional. And the article begins, the recent cases involving Kenton Harris and Louis Mercury have become defining moments in the national conversation about police accountability in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They have also exposed a deeper problem, a growing public perception that serious allegations against police officers are not treated with the urgency, transparency, and independence they deserve. Perception matters. Public confidence in law enforcement depends not only on justice being done, but also on justice being seen to be done. The Kenton Harris incident, in which a vulnerable man living with a chronic psychiatric illness was seen in widely circulated footage being assaulted by police officers, shocked the nation. While investigations have been initiated, many continue to question why previous allegations involving Harris did not receive greater attention and whether accountability has proceeded with sufficient urgency. The Louis Mercury matter has similarly generated serious public concern. Allegations that his family experienced difficulties in lodging formal complaint have contributed to a perception that the matter was not handled with the openness and urgency expected in a democratic society. Whether these concerns are ultimately substantiated is for the appropriate investigative and judicial processes to be taken. Nevertheless, such perceptions, if left unaddressed, undermine confidence in the institutions entrusted with enforcing the law. For years, allegations of excessive force and police brutality have surfaced with a disturbing frequency, yet neither the previous administration nor the current government has implemented the independent oversight mechanisms to inspire public confidence. Promises of reform have too often remained just that. So that is one thing. And the other issue related to that was something that came out of Belize, in which, let me see if I can find it, because the two are connected, in which a young woman was raped by a
military soldier,
military officer,
from the Belize Defense Force.
Yeah. And in Trinidad recently, 17 police officers, I just want to read that briefly. So because all of these are tied in, 17 police officers were terminated for various kinds of corrupt behavior and so on. And the Commissioner of Police is beating his chest that no sacred cows. But these have been going on for years. And it seems that only lip service and what I call superficial approaches youth. So I would stop here on that particular issue and have Sister Danielle comment.
Agree with you. It's systematic. It happens. You just have to open the Jamaican paper and you will see that we have our own examples of police brutality and excessive use of force. In fact, there is the current conversation now about the use of body cameras and the pushback that human rights groups are getting by asking that our own local police officers wear body cameras. You are absolutely right. When you talk about justice, there has to be accountability. But we use the word democratic society so loosely because we have to look at our Caribbean structures and our Caribbean methods of governance and really face the reality that transparency and accountability is not the norm. Who are they accountable to? Many of us don't see ourselves as being their employers, and they don't see us as being their employers, and they don't see themselves as having to report to us. Transparency, why would they tell you? Who are you? What demands can we make within the system, as we have been discussing, Brother Akko, that allows them to be accountable or forces them to do more than lip service? It is a perennial problem within the system, and it's another example of how it is that we need to look at the system of governance in the Caribbean, more specifically one that makes sure that people don't only just do lip service, because let's take it for granted. In Jamaica, we have the oversight body called INDICOM. The level of support that INDICOM gets is negligible when you talk about how impactful they can be in reducing police brutality. But at the same time, we do have a government that says we have reduced crime in an environment where there are scores of men who have been shot by the police in circumstances which have been questionable by members of the society. There is no accountability for that because what you look at are the numbers. Crime is down. And so the issue is, it doesn't matter how we get crime down, crime is down. Do you see the push and pull in the conversation, listeners? Because the push is we have an image to protect, so we're performing. So democracy in terms of accountability and transparency are not things that governments within the Caribbean are going to be focused on when they want to be able to perform.
I agree, and as you listen to the conversation, you keep seeing how much we have in common.
That's the point.
Sadly, not in our best interests, but we, the people, really have to. I know we only got like 7 minutes, but I want to ask you on a final thoughts. How do you develop courage? Because victimization is real, especially for working class people, where one lot of politicians keep on light and water and feeding and sending children to school. So you know, I bite the hand we feed you, and that the water in the pen pan for continue the oppression of we people. So how you develop courage? It come at a cost, you know. Don't feel like we there to run off we mouth, like we know there's a cost to these things, like real cost. We might not talk about it publicly, but there's a cost to it. So how you develop courage, as in a final thought, Sister Danielle and Brother Akko?
I held my head down for a moment, Brother Akko, but I'm going to yield to you because I need 2 more moments to gather my
How you develop courage, Sister YaYa? We have been speaking about character, okay? And in any proper education system, if you look at any traditional systems of education, I read a lot about Chinese systems of education, Indian systems of education. I'm sorry I don't have the book here to quote for you. A guy called Sri somebody. But central to traditional systems of education is character. It is character. You pay attention to develop the character of the person. We used to have phrases in school. I remember as a child, what's the term? You know a man not by what he has. I don't remember the exact terminology, but there were a lot of these quips and quotes about character. You know what I mean? It's not what you have, but it's what character you have. All of these things have been removed from what I call the social part of the curriculum, okay? And we now no longer pay any attention to character education. I remember at one time in Trinidad, it was done and was just lip service. But so the first thing is character. And when you develop a person with a strong character, and I'm still trying to remember the term, but as I'm talking here, when you develop a person with a strong character, one of the consequences or the growth of character is courage, because courage is very much linked to justice, and we are supposed to be trained to be just and to be fair. You see, and if we don't educate our young people, either in our homes and our schools, to develop strong characters, then we are going to lack courage as people, right? You know, there is an African saying about character. I think it's a Zulu quote, right? And it says, if I go forward, I could die. If I retreat, I will be dishonored. It is better to go forward, right? And it speaks to character and courage. And these things were imbued in what people call the culture of the group or the clan. You look at any system. If you read, for example, Jomo Kenyatta's Facing Mount Kenya, and when he speaks about the education of the Kikuyu person, central to the education of the person is the development of character. In this Western education system, there's nothing that teaches character in a significant way. It's how to get by, how to outsmart people. That's why people say English is the language of tricksters. One thing could mean 5 different things. Okay? And so a large part of why we lack courage is because we lack character. And a large part of why we lack character is because we have an education system that has failed and continue to fail us. Because again, it is not rooted in our cultural and social and historical realities.
Culture costs you always.
What is it, please?
At a cost. Culture will always, courage will always cost you. So courage will always come at a cost, regardless of the culture. So you are always going to be faced with bread and butter issues. The question is always going to be, how much are you going to stand for what is right? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to your reputation? Is it worth it to your future? When I say your future, we've had historical heroes. I think of Marcus Garvey, and think of Nani. I think of many persons such as George William Gordon within the Jamaican context, which has cost them to stand up. And so courage is part of character. But I think as a people, as individuals, when you weigh the cost of courage, you must ask yourself, is it just the right thing to do? Because nothing is going to be free. And you're going to have to make that determination whether you're going to accept the status quo and just go along with it, or really pay the price and stand up for it. And it moves us from just being individuals to being members of a community, because you understand that when you stand up for it, you're standing up for somebody who is unable to speak, somebody who perhaps has a worse situation than yourself, and you are choosing to do the right thing. So it will always come at a cost. Yes, Sister YaYa, we can't teach it. You can't pay for it. You can't buy it somewhere. You just have to decide whether or not it is going to be you standing up for others, because it's just simply the better and right thing to do. And as you talk about building better people, we're not here for ourselves. We have to think about the community we belong to and what will be left when we pass. And we think about the weight of that inheritance and determine that your legacy is not just about wealth, it's about the values you leave behind. So that's how I would interpret where you get the courage from and why it is that you choose to stand up. And just remember the cane fire. When I stand up for one, I'm sure there's going to be one other person who's emboldened by the fact that Sister YaYa has stood up. So I'm going to stand beside her. It may be one, but it may very well be worth it.
Big respect. It's a reasoning for Sunday Review. I tell you, from one day like today, I feel like I just want to watch TV. And I really appreciate both you, Sister Danielle, and you, Brother Akko, for the life and the choose for live, for making us show up as the human beings and show up as one of the Sunday Review. because they're not just one moment like this. I want to real lives, want to live every day at great sacrifice. And in a brother Ako case, the man, he might wobble, but he not fall down. He rests, and we have to give brother Ako as an elder a respect for what a few out of TNT in particular at great sacrifice will stay true to his commitment of liberation for African descendants racialized as Black people. We see you, we respect you, and we really give you flowers, brother Ako. Now wait. Tell you now that we value it. And we know you're not in it for the vanity, clearly from the life you've lived. An example for people like me and Sister Danielle coming behind. And to say the people that were in a phone circle were supporting on a family, on a friends, were checking for make sure on drink on water, on take a leave break for making another stressing yourself out. That we really see, and we appreciate, I know I got my circle and I value it as well. So with that, we are come to the end of Sunday review and give each other a minute. We're done fast, 7 o'clock. Final thoughts, Sister Danielle, brother Ako.
All right, go ahead, sister.
No, well, I think where we get from the conversation this morning is the importance of community, working through cooperatives, understanding that shared values are important. And when we recognize there is a weakness in a system that we've inherited, we've talked a lot about how weak it is. I think people need to understand that they are empowered in their own spaces to do more, to build out their own businesses, to be the leaders that they want to be. And it's not just something that's exclusive to one set of persons, but collectively we can do it. And it's just a question of whether or not you are courageous enough to take that moment to build a legacy, not just for yourself, but for your community and your country.
Big thanks, Sister Danielle. Brother Ako?
I'll make one comment on what she said there. Anyway, let me what I was going to say. You said something about shake but don't fall. So I will end by using an African quote. The tree that bends with the wind survives the storm. And so a significant part of life is not ever falling, but every time we fall, we rise again. And that quote about the tree that bends with the wind survives the storm, we have to have flexibility in it. We cannot be dogmatic. Too many times, people are dogmatic, and in their dogma, it leads to their destruction. So the tree that bends with the wind survives the storm.
Plus, it's got good roots. You have good roots, Ako. Brother Ako, you just have good roots.
Big respect. And his mom is still alive, and the people that were nurturing give thanks.
Some can bend. You can't bend if your roots not solid. I'm just being truthful.
Yeah.
Big respect. Thanks, Sister Danielle S. Archer. And remember, go check out Eaters Dispatch podcast. Thanks, Brother Ako Mutota, revolutionary to the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Here at Behind Zinc Fence Media, we have at the security booth, Shane Flowers. Here at XTV, Master Chief Operator, Sister Christy Flowers. Downstairs on the second floor at Crumb Radio, we have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. This show on repeat at 3:30 today on XTV was simulcasted on Crumb Radio. Remember, you could go to XTV Belize, Facebook, XTV Belize, YouTube at any time. Share the link, share the link, share the link. Belated Happy Earth Strong to the community organizer, Dara Robinson. I had bashment last night, the Ex-Servicemen League. Big respect, Brother Dara. Wishing you enough love, well-being. I'm sorry, 5:30. I host, thanks, Christy. I host WB so much. I said WB repeat time. Sunday reviews at 5:30 on Sundays. WB is at 3:30 on weekdays. So thanks, Christy. At 5:30 today, this show will be broadcast on XTV. Until next Sunday, only organize people and save the people. One love.
One love.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland.